This is my first write-up. I know it's long but wanted to include as many details as I could. This is a case I remember from my childhood. Introduction. The couple in their early 50s were found on their bedroom floor, bound and gagged with a single bullet to the head. Nothing else seemed out of place in the tiny immaculate home in a small country town in Queensland, Australia. The community was understandably shocked. "Things like this just never happen here," was a common reaction at the time. 45 years on, and there has been little new evidence to help solve the crime. As time passes, those who remember the incident will eventually fade away and the case seems destined to remain unsolved. Who killed the Moffats and why? Background. In the late 1970s in the small heritage city of Maryborough, Queensland, Australia, life was seemingly idyllic. Situated on the Mary River about 220 kilometres north of the state's capital of Brisbane, Maryborough was a quiet, sleepy if you will but industrious city of approximately 21,000 people. It has a rich history as a port for wool and immigration in the mid-1800s. Towards the later part of the 19th century through to the mid-1950s and 60s it was a regional centre for engineering works, shipbuilding, railways, timber and sugar mills. Just like many small rural towns all over Australia, daily life revolved around work, family and community events such as sport, church and charity functions. Life ambled on with a predictable rhythm. Described as pillars of the community, the fact that the Moffats would meet such a violent and cold-blooded end seemed incongruous with what we know about them. Bill Moffat, as he was known to friends and colleagues, was the local bank manager of the Commercial Bank of Australia. He had been with the CBA for more than 30 years. William Allen Moffat was born in 1926 in Canungra, Queensland in the Gold Coast hinterland. Bill grew up in the Gold Coast region and had been a cadet in the 66th Squadron of the Air Training Corps in 1943. He was also involved with the Scout movement since his teenage years. After leaving school he began working for the Commercial Bank of Australia in the local branch in Southport, a suburb of the Gold Coast. In 1944 he was farewelled at the Southport branch and transferred to the relieving staff at Mundubbera, a small town in country Queensland with a population of only a couple of hundred. He was on his way to a career that would eventually lead him to become bank manager. Somewhere between 1944 and 1950. It appears as though he was transferred to Home Hill in far north Queensland, approximately 1,200 kilometres north of the capital, Brisbane. It was here in Home Hill that he would meet his wife Edith Gilmore Mackenzie and they were married in 1950. Then, as noted in a newspaper of the time, the couple had transferred to Townsville by 1951. Over the next 20 or so years the Moffats were sent all over country Queensland as Bill's career progressed. By the early 1970s, they were located in Kingaroy where they spent a few years and then transferred on to Maryborough in 1974, and just like they had previously when transferred to a new town, they quickly became involved in the community via church and charity groups. The crime. On Wednesday 21 September 1977, the day before the murders, on what seemed like any other ordinary day, the Moffats rose early and went about their normal lives. Bill, as always, would be the first employee at the bank to begin the tasks of the day and was hard at work by 8:30 a.m. He was known to be punctual and reliable. Bill was working on some loan applications, but at 9:30 a.m. he walked the short distance to the local library to give a presentation to the local philately society. stamp collecting being one of his interests. He also had an extensive and quite valuable collection. By about 11 a.m. he had returned to the bank on the corner of Adelaide and Kent Streets to continue working on the loan applications. He was still at his desk until around 5:30 p.m., after which he returned to their Jupiter Street home to prepare for meetings they both had that evening. Like many other evenings, the couple were heading out to attend various events. Edith was to attend a charity fashion parade and Bill had a church meeting scheduled. He was the secretary for the local Uniting Church, and was helping with the restructuring and financial matters related to the merging of the Presbyterian and Methodist Church that had occurred earlier in the year. Kay Hasser, a close family friend, arrived at around 7 p.m. to pick up Edith, and both left the house at 7:15 p.m. Bill then drove to the church meeting soon after. Both were home by 11 p.m. that night. Nothing appeared awry or out of the ordinary for the events that occurred that day or evening. In the early hours of the next morning, on the 22nd of September 1977, a resident in Jupiter Street and nearby, neighbor of the couple, Eddie Crawford, awoke to use the bathroom. It was approximately 3 a.m. Eddie, half asleep, thought he heard two muffled shots, just seconds apart. But being tired and unsure, Eddie dismissed it and went back to bed. The Moffats' blue cattle dog, Bindi, would usually bark whenever they arrived home or if there was a disturbance in the neighborhood, but she remained silent. By 9:30 a.m. when the bank opened, the usually punctual and dependable Bill was nowhere to be seen. Colleagues were somewhat surprised. Meanwhile, at the local Uniting Church, Jean Menadieu, another friend of Edith's, had noticed she had not turned up for a ladies' guild meeting that was scheduled to start at 9:30 a.m. By 9:45 a.m. Jean had become concerned and decided to drive the short distance from the church to the Jupiter Street home. Jean arrived and parked the car. Walking past the garage and around to the back of the house, she noticed some back windows were open. The curtains blew in and out of the window. Jean called out to Edith, but no one answered. Under one of the windows was a small step ladder propped up against the house, as well as Bindi, curled up asleep on a pile of blankets. Coming back around the side of the house and out through the small gate, Jean noticed several newspapers on the footpath. A full bottle of milk, which had not been collected, was standing in its wooden box near the side fence. Not long after Jean returned to the church, along with another mutual friend, Ruth Harriman. They decided to call the CBA bank to inquire whether Bill knew where Edith was. CBA accountant Doug Bell had already called Bill, but the phone had rang out. A short time later, Jean and Ruth drove to the bank and spoke to Doug and asked if he would accompany them back to the house. Doug agreed, and on the way they also picked up Pastor Morris Harriman, Ruth's husband. They arrived back at the house at approximately 10:30 a.m. Doug recalls touching the bonnet of Bill's Valiant Regal, which was parked in the carport. The bonnet was cold, and with a sense of dread, both Doug and Morris decided they had to enter the house. As Doug crawled in through the window via the step ladder, he again called out to the couple, which went unanswered. Inside the house, it was quiet and there appeared to be no signs of a disturbance. Edith's handbag, which contained an amount of cash, was left untouched. Other household valuables, jewelry and Bill's briefcase that contained the keys to the bank remained undisturbed. On the kitchen table lay a pile of church account books and documents that Bill may have brought home to do more work on. All seemed in order and remarkably normal as the two men made their way down the hallway to the bedroom, where they came across a confronting and horrifying scene. Both Bill and Edith lay face down, hands bound behind their backs tied with a distinctive pink rope. They had been gagged with what appeared to be Bill's work ties. Both were dressed in their pajamas, dressing gowns and slippers. The bed covers had both been thrown back as if they had hastily gotten out of bed. Edith was lying horizontal to the end of the bed end with Bill at a slight angle. Their heads were on pillows and close together. There was a small red hole behind Bill's ear and a large pool of blood trailed off towards their bedroom wall. Both Edith age 50 and Bill age 51 were deceased. Clues. A single fingerprint. In one newspaper report shortly after the killings, it was stated that all fingerprints in the house were accounted for. However, in a more recent recounting of the case, it was reported that one lone fingerprint was located on the bed end near where the bodies lay. This fingerprint remains unidentified. The pink rope. 2 lengths of pink nylon rope were used to tie the victim's wrists. The knot that tied Edith's hands was very neat, like a knot perhaps learned in the Scouts. A similar knot was found outside on the clothesline. In contrast, Bill's hands were tied so tightly that the rope dug into his wrists and could not be seen at first glance. This suggests that the killer may have instructed Bill to tie Edith's wrists first, while the killer in turn tied Bill's. A small personal anecdote. At the time the distinctive pink rope was discussed in the media at some length. Police asked business owners to come forward if they had sold anything similar to the described rope. My parents owned a corner shop in the region and had felt uneasy that they had indeed sold some pink rope commonly used as clothesline cord to a customer in the weeks before the crime. Police did come to our shop and took away some rope of the same type, but it was later determined that they were not the same. In fact, the rope used to tie the Moffats' wrists was very commonly sold in any hardware. A white Valiant RP5. It was reported that a white Valiant AP5 sedan was seen parked outside the Jupiter Street house at around 5:30 a.m. But why would the killer risk being seen by nosy neighbors by lingering so long in the house after killing the couple? If the shots heard at 3 o'clock to 3:15 a.m. were the time of death that puts the killer in the house for approximately 2.5 hours after death, sunrise would have also been around 5:30 a.m. on that day. The 2 bullets. The bullets used were from a .22 caliber handgun or rifle. Each bullet was made by different manufacturers, though the police believe there was only one killer. The only known thing taken from Jupiter Street that night were the casings and the lives of the well-respected couple. Theories. A bank robbery gone wrong? One of the first theories was discounted fairly quickly. Bill had the keys to open the bank doors but no access to code numbers that would open the safe. It seems highly unlikely that a professional criminal would risk taking a pajamaed Bill to the center of town in the dead of night. Personal grievances. Was it a disgruntled bank customer or perhaps a personal disagreement with acquaintances, community or church members? These theories have been discounted as no evidence has ever come to light to support them. People who had been denied mortgages and loans were thoroughly investigated with no person of interest ever named. The couple was described as mild-mannered and well-liked, being involved in many local charities, the Uniting Church, Scouts and other community groups such as the Lions and Rostrum. They appear to have had no enemies. Did Bill know too much? It has been reported that Bill went to church with the then Queensland State Premier Joe Bielka-Peterson back when he was bank manager in the Kingaroy area. The notorious Bielka-Peterson left office in 1987 following 20 years in office amid widespread Allegations of corruption. Bielka Peterson had been the CBA's one customer in his hometown of Kingaroy while Bill had been stationed there. Was Bill privy to some unscrupulous dealings by the Premier a decade earlier? When Bielka Peterson heard of the slayings, he sent a crack team of detectives to investigate his friend's murder. No evidence has been uncovered to suggest any of these rumors are true. The hitman theory. In recent years, police have theorized that Bill, whose job also required him to make property valuations, may have uncovered some dodgy land deals that may have been carried out to launder money by southern crime syndicates. Records show that some valuations were unusually high in the nearby town of Harvey Bay. Harvey Bay is a seaside town that was popular at the time with southern tourists. Property developers would fly hotshots from Sydney and Melbourne up for the weekend to purchase land. It was a common practice at the time to advertise properties in southern states at much higher prices than locals were prepared to pay. This flourished in a time before the Internet, when the necessity of relying on the integrity of real estate agents and property developers was unavoidable. This may have been orchestrated to create a property boom at the time. Harvey Bay was being touted as a new tourist hotspot similar to the Gold Coast. Did this invite southern gangster rings to move in and essentially use the situation to launder money? Did Bill start questioning the land valuations? This theory seems the most plausible but is still unfounded. Summary. Bill and Edith were married for 27 years. Had no children but were devoted to one another. If Bill had to make a property valuation in a nearby town, they would make a day trip of the occasion with Edith accompanying him for the ride. They had many friends who they enjoyed regular dinner parties with. The weekend prior to the slaying, friends had attended a barbecue with the couple. This may have been a celebration as it was Edith's birthday just a week before her death. The Moffats were a well-liked couple, described as quiet and conservative, with many friends. They were actively and positively involved in their local small country town's community. How did their lives end with what seems like a professional hit? Their friends and colleagues may now indeed no longer be with us, but the community and those who remember this tragedy hope that one day the killer will be brought to justice. Though not mentioned anywhere in reports, Edith's mother lived on to 1998, where she died in a nursing home at the age of 97. I found this through publicly available cemetery records. It's heartbreaking to think she lived 21 years beyond the death of her daughter without ever receiving any answers to the questions we still have about who killed the Moffats. If anyone has any information relative to this case, no matter how small, please contact Crime Stoppers on 1800 333,000. A reward of $250,000 is offered for any information that leads to the arrest of those responsible. Sources: NSFW. My own personal recollections. Many other newspaper reports that I used are behind paywalls. However, I was able to access them online through my state library.